Royce had a very good performance across the lineup in the first quarter. 10 of the 11 domestic small cap funds benchmarked to the 2000 beat the benchmark. 10 of 11, that's really pretty good. But I can understand people looking at it and saying, wow, your best fund was up over 9 and the fund that lagged the most was down over 4. That seems a pretty big disparity. Help us to understand it. And I think we would say that the array of funds where they landed in the lineup was sort of consistent with our expectation given the factors that were going on in the various markets, though perhaps the magnitude was a little greater than you might expect. We think it is important, though, to emphasize is that we didn't do anything in change in process. The same things we were doing in the fourth quarter and the third quarter in 2014 were things that we were doing in the first quarter. Just the market altered, so it rewarded things a little bit differently. As we look at the value funds, there's some nuances here. And so if we look at first perhaps the Opportunity Fund, which had the lowest performance, it's important to it still beat the 2000. It's important to recognize that the Opportunity Fund is about half in microcap, and microcap lags small cap. The microcap index was down about 5.4%. So when you're aware of that, it puts a little bit in context why you might expect within our value opportunity to lag. The next three, the dividend value and the total return and the special equity, they're all our lower volatility offerings. We would generally expect them to be in the middle of the range of our value offerings during a quarter like this. So that leaves small cap value. Small cap value, if you look over its history, has about 100%, a little over 100% in terms of its upside capture, a little less than 100 in the downside. So in a market where small cap value type of stocks were rewarded, this small cap value fund leading our value array, that makes complete sense to us. Within the core funds as well, if we go sort of that next level, there's some nuance there. Let's start with the low price stock fund. That's another one that has about half in microcap. And again, microcap declined, the benchmark declined about 5%. So we would expect low price itself to probably have a little bit more of a headwind in that kind of environment. Then the middle grouping, the Heritage Fund and the Premier Fund, as well as the Small Cap Leaders Fund, those are a high quality, we call them our Premier Suite. They execute a pretty similar strategy at different capitalization ranges. So in an environment where value is really rewarded, they are real true core funds, and them being in the middle of a core array makes sense to us. The one nuance, the surprise I would say, is actually Small Cap Leaders. That's a fund that has actually a fair amount of microcap, and that being a strong performance in the quarter is really a testament to the manager. Then Pennsylvania Mutual Fund being the best performing of our core funds, again, in a quarter where value beat growth, Pennsylvania Mutual is the most value-oriented of our core funds. So that it lands there in the array makes perfect sense to us. So the one fund of our small cap, domestic small cap funds that actually underperformed the benchmark was the Smaller Companies Growth Fund. What we've seen historically, the performance pattern here, is it often lands between the 2000, the core, and the growth index. So if you go back to last year, last calendar year, that's exactly what happened, is that it outperformed the 2000 and it underperformed the growth index. And this year, when it was reversed, when growth did worse than value, it outperformed the growth index and underperformed the 2000. You know, because that's a valuation sensitive, we call it growth at a reasonable price, growth orientation, that portfolio, that also makes sense to us where it landed. So going forward, how would you apply that and what expectations would you have? Well, in addition to being aware of sort of value, core, and growth, it's helpful to go down to the next level in understanding. It's helpful to understand what's the volatility profile within that style classification that each of our funds have, and that can sort of set expectations on what type of quarter is, if it's strongly up, strongly down, or in the middle. The other is to be aware of sort of the capitalization breakdown. Of the funds like Opportunity and Low Price and Small Cap Leaders that have a healthy amount of microcap, how did microcap do versus small cap? And that'll give you an indication of how these might do in our overall array.